So, listeners, if you're not watching, I am wearing headphones for the first time in a really long time. I have not been a headphone video maker in a while, but we have had the flu in the house. And so my husband is working from home and he is also still getting over being sick. So he is unusually loud. He's always loud, but he's unusually loud. So I'm hoping between the headphones and the microphone and all of that connection that you are also not privy to the contents of his phone conversation that he's currently having right now. So it's the beauty of it's like a little throwback to 2020 when we were all working from home and trying to shout over each other. So which is maybe fitting for today's topic because, typically I start these shows with what are the weeds of the week. And I'll have to be honest, it's been really difficult to come up with one thing. I was originally supposed to talk about sort of getting into the new year and slowly going after your resolutions and trying to deal with an empty nest and all of the things that were sort of the quote unquote normal weeds of life after a big change and a big move. But then the world sort of exploded right outside my back door. So for those of you who don't know, I have recently relocated, not so recently anymore, about 6 months ago, relocated to the Twin Cities area. I am not directly in Minneapolis, but I'm about 11 miles outside of Minneapolis in a suburb of Minneapolis. But I spend a significant amount of time in Minneapolis because that is where I would like to be. If I did not have 3 dogs and 3 children, I would have got a, condo right in the center of town. I love it. I love being this close. I love having such clear access to the city. I'm a city girl as much as I think I want to farm with animals and acres and acres of land. What I really love is to sort of be in the mix of everything. So we have spent a significant amount of time since I moved here in the cities. We've gone to a soccer game in St. Paul. We've gone to football and basketball and WNBA and NBA and a Vikings game. But we've also got pretty regular season tickets to a theater that's in town. We've been trying new restaurants. We met friends for dinner. Like we've sort of tried to find all different pockets of the city since we've been here. And I really love it. I love the area. I love that we're so close to it. And I feel really sort of connected to it pretty quickly after we moved. So when everybody was home for the break, we had the city was just in the national news because our president deemed us. So, we've had some weird YouTubers here who have been, making videos basically full of lies about the place. There is some truth to what they're talking about. There was definitely some fraud in the area. Some massive fraud in the area, but quite frankly, no different than the fraud that happened in New York and Texas and Florida right after the, all the money that came after COVID. People really took advantage of that. But for whatever reason, Minneapolis has been the target of media campaigns lately. Not for whatever reason, because Republicans in the state want to get rid of the governor. And so they have brought it up again. Let's put it that way. Anyway, so the kids arrived home from school and we were sort of broiled in that like fraud debate, which it wasn't news here. It's actually been under investigation. They've been putting things in place to try to prevent it in the future and also to prosecute the people that were in charge of it to begin with. So that was happening. We had a holiday, fairly normal holiday. My oldest got sick, so that wasn't so normal. But we went into the city for Christmas Eve dinner. We went down and visited my relatives in the southern part of the state for part of it. We had a lovely little week of peace and seeing this place in sort of all its glory, because boy, does it know how to do the winter season. Like no other. I mean, there's just something to do every day if you want. There's a holiday market. There is there's ice skating. There's snowshoeing. There's, all lit up trails that you can go on. There's a million wonderful things you can do during the holiday season. We went to a WNBA game. I'm sorry, that's a lie. We went to an NBA game, as my kids and I call it, an MNBA game, men's NBA. We went to see the Timberwolves play the New York Knicks. So that was great fun. We just did a lot of cool things. It was kind of nice, actually. They're going to listen to this and be mad at me, but it was kind of nice. Because they weren't home. They weren't, familiar really with the place. My college kids, they didn't, like, usually when your college kids come home for a break, you see them for like 24 hours and then they're off and out with friends, or maybe they're working for the few weeks or they're doing whatever. But because they weren't super familiar with the place, they were around a lot, which was kind of nice. They also didn't have a car. So they had to share the car with their older sister. So they would sometimes drop her off to work and then disappear for the day and go, whatever, thrifting, or there's a bunch of record shops and bookshops that they went to, and they saw like 8,000 movies while they were home. So there was time where they were out and I wasn't, but I got to spend, I think, probably more time with them than you normally would as a parent with a holiday break. So anyway, that was great. And then the last week they were here, which is always a weird week anyway, because it's post all of the holidays, but they're still out of school. But like, I had to get back to work and my husband had to get back to work, and my daughter was finally feeling better. So she was back at work. And then also we had sort of increased ice activity, and it was really affecting the community of not only Minneapolis, but out into the suburbs as well. And my daughter's got friends in the city that were affected by it. And we were sort of questioning, do we go in? Do we not? Do we had theater tickets? Do we do that? Then the woman was shot in the face by the ICE officer, shot and killed. And that became international news, not just national news, but international news, largely because of the government's lack of response to it and somehow vilifying this woman who was, by all accounts, either a completely like innocent, just in the road because that's where she lived, or there's still not total clarity on this, or she was a legal observer of ICE activity. Either way, watch any one of the millions of videos, and it's really clear who is at fault and who isn't at fault in this one. And at the very least, there has been no cooperation or investigation. So needless to say, that sort of occupied a lot of our brain space for the last 4 days that the kids were home. And then also, like, I was a little extra worried of, like, are they going to be safe at the airport? What's the, activity there? Whatever. They got out safely. Everything's fine. But it sort of threw this whole different, it took the, focus off. I started this all by saying, like, it's hard to come up with what are the weeds, because that became the like sort of epicenter of what we're doing, for better or worse. I'm not saying that I'm doing it right. I'm just saying that's what happened. Like, yes, I was concerned about my kids, but I do feel like I got kind of the last few days of their vacations stolen from us because we were so occupied by what was going on and what could we do and how could we help and whatever to our new community. And they're now gone and back to school and trying to do their thing. And I am, and all three of them left on the same day. They all got in an airplane. I all got on airplanes to go either back to college, or my oldest had to go. She's working on a project where they had to shoot some film out in the New York, New Jersey area. So she was back on a plane the same morning they were. So it was like empty nest, like, on steroids. And I haven't even really fully sort of processed that because of all of the stuff that's going on right outside the door. So the weeds have been tricky, but it has me thinking, like, really honestly, I started my career as a trauma therapist in 2016. It's been 10 years since I finalized my schooling and all the hours and hours of licensure and all of that stuff, and just was in and in that career, I've been in a courthouse with domestic and sexual violence survivors. I've been in a hospital with both kids and adults. And in the adults, it was a co-occurring mental health and a substance abuse program, day program. I've been in trauma-centered group practices where we specifically take people who, one of which was started after like a rash of teenagers took their own lives. It was kind of started as a response to that. So my point is, I've done almost every bit of my work deeply entrenched in some sort of trauma, whether it's bodily, trauma, whether it's child abuse, whether it's like devastating environmental things that have happened. Oh, also, it was years after, but I went back to school as a result of my involvement in the recovery from Superstorm Sandy. And even though I didn't get into the actual business of it all until 5 years after Hurricane Sandy or Superstorm Sandy, there were still plenty of people who were recovering from that storm. And also, even if they were technically recovered and back in their houses, they were still carrying around a lot of the trauma from that event. The point of my telling you all this is that I was going to say it has felt like we've all been sort of in this collective trauma since 2016. But the truth is, it's hard for me to know because my job has been trauma since 2016. And also then we've just had some really strange things happen. So if you want to be fair and apolitical about it, we have all been experiencing some sort of trauma since 2020 because a global pandemic, no matter where you fall on what you thought, how we should have handled things, the way things were handled and the way things played out was traumatic for people. You know, a lot of us lost loved ones. A lot of us lost time. A lot of us had mental health experiences that we might not have had otherwise. A lot of kids lost, you know, like core memory instances and activities were gone. Like there's a lot that we were dealing with through that. Then we sort of recover from that. You know, there's other things that happen. There's wildfires. There's like, it just seems like the hits keep on coming. And that's sort of how I felt this week of like, man, I don't know where to turn. I don't know in which direction to look. Am I personally, you know, I'm going through these massive changes. I've just had all my kids leave the nest that is not in a place that I am super familiar with yet. I'm getting there, but you know, I'm still new here. I don't have the support system that I had in my old home that could have sort of scooped me up in my empty nestness. You know, I'm sort of out here on my own as I'm dealing with this. But also, I'm now part of this community that's going through a massive crisis. And those community members have just lived through a pretty similar crisis 4 or 5 years ago. You know, again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, remember that Minneapolis was the site, in fact, 4 blocks away from where the woman was killed a couple days ago. George Floyd was killed by law enforcement. So everyone in this city has been living in through trauma, and those who are still here, a lot of people left, a lot of people are new to it, a lot of people are sort of have, you know, lived through that transition, and that's re-triggering, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know. I haven't spoken to anybody specifically, but I can imagine, just knowing what I know from trauma, that the familiarity of this situation, the law enforcement being, you know, oppressive and not feeling like they're here to protect you. And I hesitate to use law enforcement because I don't consider ICE law enforcement. I think right now, look, Minneapolis has a complicated relationship with law enforcement anyway, but I think the MPD is a very different thing than what ICE and Border Patrol is doing right now. And so I hesitate to even say law enforcement because they're two sort of different things. However, in this umbrella of like, who do we trust to take care of us? I'm not sure the city of Minneapolis trusts anybody right now. And so these things that are happening, I'm certain, have re-triggered trauma for folks that maybe thought they were through it or over it or, you know, had been rebuilding from it. And so here I find myself plopped into the center of a community again that is in crisis, much like the community that I was involved with after Superstorm Sandy. Different types, but look, trauma comes in all shapes and sizes. Crisis comes in all shapes and sizes. This is currently a crisis. Like, we are living in a crisis. And the difference is, like, it's acute, it's happening, it's in the moment, and it feels like you don't know where to turn. It's like a fire hose of stuff happening. And meanwhile, you can't like open your phone or turn on the news without there being something else too. Because, I forgot to mention, in the middle of all that, we invaded and kidnapped the leader of Venezuela. And again, whatever you think of that, fine, but it's big. It's big news. And then I think just today, I saw the state of Minnesota is now suing the Department of Homeland Security because we don't think what they're doing is lawful. But also, I think the Fed chair is under investigation, or maybe being, I don't know, indicted. I honestly, and they're talking about taking over Greenland. So like, my point, and I'm only chuckling because I'm like, can you imagine the things that I'm saying? Like, the things that are coming out of my mouth? Does this even sound normal to you? And I'm chuckling because I'm like, yeah, this is the problem, is that I don't even have all the details because I'm still absorbed in the Minneapolis of it all. So I don't even know, like, there's all these other things coming into my consciousness. And I'm like, I can't even focus on one of them. It's literally a fire hose of events. And I've got kids that have gone back to school. I have to figure out how to, I'm paying their, I got to make sure I got their tuition paid. I got to make sure they have like, socks and underwear, like cleaning products for the dorm room, like things that, the normal sort of back to school stuff that got kind of lost in the shuffle in the last few days. I'm trying to keep up with them and like be the mom who says like, how was your first day of class? And, how are things going? And how can I be here to support you? Even though I would really rather be like on the streets, standing in front of the federal building, trying to express my discontent with what's going on. So the whole point of all this is like this crisis, this current crisis, however, whether it's in my city or the world, whatever you want, however you view it, is like the ultimate, wonder in the weeds moment, because you can't sustain this level of intensity for the long haul. And even though it's a crisis, I do not believe it's going to be as short term as a crisis should be. So let's look at the superstorm. Like there was 5 days, let's say 4 days of like prepping for it, of like gearing ourselves up both physically and emotionally for this thing that was going to happen. Then the thing happens. So that's 2 days. Then there's an aftermath, but even in the aftermath, you can start to make sense of some things. So like, even though like you maybe left, you vacated, you come back and there's no house there. That doesn't make any sense, right? You can't like, your brain is not going to immediately know what to do. But yet in that aftermath, there are like, okay, well, at least I know now I have to do X, Y, and Z. It's not this sort of total confusion that it was the days before, because you didn't really know what you needed to do. You were just doing the very next thing that was in line. Pack a bag, get out, go to safer ground, go to higher ground, whatever. There were steps to it. There were things that acute, fire hose crisis moment dissipated a little bit, and you could start to sort of see things and make sense of it in a way. Now it sort of feels like, at least in here, and I would imagine people in Chicago and Los Angeles can relate to this. And I know they're everywhere else. I know I've seen video in North Carolina, whatever, but it does feel like we're a little bit more under siege than other cities have been, but bear with me. Right now, it feels like I don't know when we're going to be able to come to a place where we know more than one step ahead what to do next. It feels like right now we're like, okay, I get up in the morning and I protest, or I find a place that I can deliver food, or I find a place where I can donate, or I find a place, like those are the sort of actions to be taken to get through the day. If you don't live here, but you're tuned in and you're plugged in and you're sort of still experiencing that crisis of it all, you don't have the sort of the quote unquote luxury of being here. So you are trying to manage all of this stuff and also still go to work and take your kids to school and make lunches and all of those things. And so that's what I mean by like, it's not this like fevered pitch that's then going to dissipate and we can all come down a little bit and figure out what's next. It feels like if we're here, we're up at that fevered pitch, sort of keeping our head on a swivel, not really knowing exactly which direction to look. And if you're not here, but you're still tuned into it, or you're tuned into one of the other millions of things I mentioned that are going on in the world, you're trying to figure out, how do I sustain myself in regular life while also paying attention and doing what I need to do to sort of regulate over here with this crisis / traumatic thing that's going on. I'm not sure I'm making any sense. I really hope I am. But what I'm trying to say is, if you're here in the city suburbs of Minneapolis, you are in the middle of a crisis because it is happening all around you, and you cannot ignore it. I suppose some people can, but mostly you can't ignore it. Anybody who's listening to this wouldn't be able to ignore it. If you're not in the city and you're not directly affected, and you could actually probably ignore it if you wanted, again, if you're listening to this, you're not that person. You're not ignoring it. You're looking, you're seeing, you're wondering, you're anxious, you're you're worried, all of the things. So what do we do in either case? What do we do? And the antidote to all of that anxiety is always action in some way. But I would go a little farther and say not only action, but then also the grace to understand your part. So I just said earlier, like, I really wish I was out on the streets, protesting right now. But honestly, I don't know if I do wish that, because I don't know that that is a thing that I'm supposed to be doing for two reasons. One, because I don't know enough of the area to know like resources to help people or where to send people, or, if somebody gets pepper sprayed in the eyes, I don't know where, not only do I not know how to take care of it in the moment, I could figure that out probably, but I don't even know where to send them for like safety stuff. I don't have the community roots yet to be able to do that kind of thing. What I can do is find first person accounts and help spread the word. And also I've been looking at community organizations that I can either physically go to and volunteer or donate to help them do the work that they're doing on the ground. People who are feeding people who are watching children, people who are sort of part of the community and want and need assistance and need help, either my time or my talents or my money. I'm doing that. I'm also sharing with people outside of here because I know that people want to help that aren't here. And so I'm finding trusted sources and sharing those with people too. So that's my role right now. After the storm, after Superstorm Sandy, I physically went to a town that was completely devastated by it and helped in whatever way someone told me to. I passed out blankets. I went and took inventory from survivors to see what they might need. I helped spread the word about where resources were. And then I continued that work in my work as a therapist by plugging into local community organizations, helping people find resources when they needed to rebuild, all of those things. Like, I just did as much as I could. And in both cases, now and back then, I gave myself grace when I wasn't doing all of it. Because I'll be honest, there's a part of me right now that feels really guilty that I'm not out on the street protesting, or I'm not out on the street like driving kids to and from, school because their parents are afraid to leave, or driving to get groceries for people because their parents are afraid to leave. But the truth is, I wouldn't be very good at that right now because I don't know enough to know, I'd be like the creepy stranger lady who's offering to drive your kids to school. That's not helpful. So I have to find other things to do. And then I have to give myself enough grace to be like, okay, you can't do everything. And that doesn't make you a bad person. You can't do it all. And in that same vein, so let's wrap that up by saying, like, what is the action that you can take? Because action is the antidote. So what is the action you can take to make the anxiety lessen a little bit, or to feel like, okay, I'm doing my part to help not let this thing get completely wildly out of control? And two, in what areas can you give yourself grace to sort of let yourself off of that hook responsibly wise? Like, I don't need to be doing all of it. I cannot do all of it. My role is not that right now. If you are a mom of young kids, honestly, your job right now is to raise those young kids and maybe donate to a GoFundMe or something. Like, you want to, as a mom, you want to do all of it because your heart is so big and you feel so terrible, and you can put yourself in the shoes of the people who are this is happening to. And so you want to do everything you can. And you have little tiny people in your house that you have to take care of and feed and make lunches and go get them to places and all of those things, and teach them how not to grow up to be the people that we're seeing on these videos. How do you grow up? How do you raise them better than what you're seeing on the TV? That's your job. And so don't waste your energy feeling bad about the fact that you're not doing one of the other 10 things. Somebody else is doing that, and you can support them however they need to be supported, but you don't have to do all of it. So find the thing you can do, find the action, find the solution, and do it. And then give yourself the grace that you can't do all of it. Understand that you have a purpose, and find out what that is, and then don't feel guilty about not doing the other 900 things that there are possibly out there to do. And this brings me to another point about all of this, which is online, whatever your social media of choice is can be right now a bit of a cesspool. And I have been fairly decent at resisting the temptation to try to change any hearts and minds in the comment section for a long time. Actually, I realized a long time ago that wasn't an effective use of my time or even really doing what I thought it was going to do. It was really just stirring up other stuff. That said, I want to be fully transparent and tell you I got completely sucked into it this time because a person that I grew up with, actually like a dad of someone I grew up with, I have been watching him spew all sorts of nonsense for the last 10 years at this point. And I've largely ignored it. I shouldn't say that. I have largely ignored it online. I have personally, it has broken my heart in a million different ways. He was somebody that I once, I don't want to say looked up to, but respected, very intelligent, very noble. I thought very kind. And the stuff that he puts online now is just anything but those things. There's no nobility. There's no kindness. There's no compassion. There's no understanding. It's just this sort of, I don't know what it is. I've stopped trying to figure it out, but I want to be transparent and tell you that I am not above taking this stuff in. I say ignore it and don't get involved in it. But the truth is it affected me more than I wish it did. And I have largely taken that app out of my life. That's Facebook. I've largely taken it out of my life because it just became more and more either that or ads for stuff or sponsored content from people I've never heard of in my life. So I didn't even go there much anymore. I would go in occasionally to check on one group that I belong to. Sadly, a lot of people still do a lot of that kind of stuff on Facebook, and I need to get them off of it. It's the whole reason I started the Wonder community, by the way. The Women of Wonder community was to get people off these apps, but that's a conversation for a later day. Anyway, I have largely gotten off that app, but I have to go on it sometimes to check up real, actual information reasons. And I got sucked into a thing he said about Minneapolis, which I thought it was the one time he asked a question that, silly me, I thought was legitimately looking for an answer. And so I gave my answer. And then I just got, condescended to is how I will say it. I won't say attacked because it's not that. It's just condescended to. And this you could almost feel the people patting you on the head when they're like, oh, you disagree with me? Well, it must be because you're dumb. Or you're drinking the Kool-Aid or whatever. He actually said that. You must be drinking the far left Kool-Aid. Anyway, I digress. My point is that I think is a whole other factor these days that can be both helpful and really harmful if we're not careful. So I think there is some good information on these apps still, not Facebook, but on Instagram and TikTok. I think you can still get some good first person accounts. However, it is getting increasingly difficult to fight and to tease out AI. So 2 warnings I would have or 2 suggestions I have, and I'm trying to follow myself. One is only go look, try to avoid the scroll because then you're just going to get fed things that you don't know who the sources are. It's a little different on TikTok because you can have a friends list that you follow, but actually that whole algorithm is all jacked up now that it's American run. So I don't even know. If you're not there, don't go there. And if you are there, change the way you do things because that app is that thing has permanently changed now that the US has taken over it. But Instagram, you have no control anymore of what you see in your scroll. It's just they just decide. The algorithm completely decides what you see. So if you can avoid scrolling and simply just go to people's profiles that you trust and know, that's always a better way of using it because then you're seeing something from a person and not just some generated garbage. Now, if the person that you think you trust and know is sharing generated stuff, then you might want to rethink who you're following. So that would be my first thing. If you're going to be on them strategically, which is tricky to do if you've not been that way up to this point, because we're all sort of programmed now to just sort of, mindlessly. And again, in full disclosure, if you're listening, by the way, I was imitating scrolling my phone. That's what that little noise was. In case you can't decipher my strange noises, that was me showing you how to scroll your phone. I in full disclosure, I am struggling with this because I used to use those things as an escape from the reality of the world. Again, 10 years as a trauma therapist, I sometimes would just need to scroll, especially TikTok for, stand-up comedians and puppy videos. That used to be sort of my whole MO. Well, TikTok is not that anymore. I haven't seen a stand-up comedian in a while I haven't seen a puppy video in even longer. Instagram is a little bit more like that because I know where to go. Like, go follow the doggist and you'll just have delightful doggy content. But I have had to really change my habits with those apps because I was getting sucked into the sort of mindless scrolling that comes from just being completely overwhelmed with the world, but B, the type of scrolling that was like enraging me. And being out here sort of isolated and not having like a neighbor I can just go walk down the street and say hello to, or go outside and talk about real life with, or whatever. It was harder to like remember real life. You know, I've talked earlier in the episode about going out into the city a lot. And that's by design because I'm like, we have to get out of this house and I have to get off this phone. Like, I have to get out into the world. A couple days before all of this stuff happened, major stuff happened. I dropped my kids off at a movie theater in the city and went for a walk after, while they were there. I just didn't go home. I just was like, go see the movie and I'll go walk. It was freezing, but we went for a walk through a little part of Minneapolis that is beautiful and came across this giant group of Latino family members all trying to take a picture, helped them take a picture. Like, it was just like a joyous thing. They were gathered on this bridge. It was a beautiful thing. They were having a lovely day. We offered to help because they were trying to set up phones and cameras and all this other stuff. So we offered to help. And it was a great reminder of how wonderful the city is, but also that like not everybody hates everybody. And not everybody is like out to get everybody, which is kind of what it felt like. Here was this giant group of Latino folks who were not in danger in that moment and were celebrating and enjoying life. And it was a wonderful reminder that like that there's more of that than your algorithms would have you think. So if you're going to be on them a little more strategically. And if you can get off them, get off them. And this will be a topic for another day because I could go on and on, but it does feel tricky these days to know if you're not on these apps, like, well, where are you getting your news? Because it's harder, at least for me, to trust news sources anymore. I'm like, not really sure what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing and seeing is real or not completely one-sided. And either side, I'm having a hard time sort of finding the truth in mainstream media these days. Anyway, that's a topic for another day. For today, in crisis, if you're feeling triggered by the trauma that is going on outside of our doors right now, whether you're in the city or not, I'm sure there's something in the news that has got you sort of worked up. Action is an antidote to any kind of anxiety. Give yourself some grace and get out into the world, interact with real people. I love the kids say, go out and touch grass. Yeah. I mean, it'd be snow in my case right now, but I'm sure there's some grass peeking through. I could go touch, but really what works for me is human interaction. Get out, go to the store, talk to the cashier, just be out in the world and remember how good so many people are out there. And then give yourself a little grace to absorb it all, figure it all out, and have days where you don't figure it out too, because there's plenty of those also. So that's the wonder this week is humans. The wonder for me has been other humans and the resiliency and the way that they show up for one another and the way that they listen and the way that they fight and the way that they refuse to give up. So get out into the world and see them instead of just focusing on all the other stuff that isn't so great and isn't so human. All right. That's all I got for this week. I'll be back soon. And don't worry, my daughter's coming back soon, so we'll be able to do a few more episodes. I know you guys prefer her to me anyway. Have a good one. Keep looking for the wonder in all the weeds. So I mentioned earlier in this episode, the group Women of Wonder, and it truly is my attempt at recreating what used to be good about social media, the community and the connection and the place to go on your phone when you want to say something or share something or like something or heart something. I really wanted to recreate that in a way that was safe and not at the mercy of some algorithm or some, dude and his idea of how to make money and how to make things good. I do charge for it, but it's a nominal fee, monthly or yearly. It's less than a cup of coffee these days per month. And You get a discount if you do it for the whole year. And we meet once a month on Zoom to just sort of come together and have about an hour of self-care and reflection. We talk every week. There's a prompt for you on the group that gets the conversation going. And then it's your group. So you're free to add whatever you want, whenever you want. I also do another coffee conversation in the middle of the month for newcomers or for anybody who just needs to check in and talk to real people. I would really love to have you on the inside. Right now we are small but mighty, but we would love to add more to our folks. So if you are missing the connection and the camaraderie and the joy and the laughter that used to come from, the olden days of Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, come join us over in Women of Wonder. And I promise we will recreate as much of it as we can there without all the nasty ads and algorithms. All right. Can't wait to see you on the inside.